Yeah, so it may be nice to tell those of you who haven't attended this before that this is an initiative that came out of a conference that we held in the Corona period, where the conference was constantly postponed, and then we thought, let's start talking online in small groups. So we do this regularly. Every 2 months is the ideal. I think it happens every 3 months in reality, but maybe more in the future. And it was always based in the University of Amsterdam, but now we've expanded to the University of Dublin and Utrecht as well. And we're we hope to be a very friendly, accessible bunch where people can just volunteer to talk about their work, both research and policy, and also maybe people in the creative sector and the arts who were also involved in the initial conference. The University of Dublin is currently running most of the administration. So that's also Katarina who came in and set up this LinkedIn page. So I don't know if you have the right reference for people you can maybe share.
Yes, I will just share it. I think Ungu will share it in the chat, so everyone
Wonderful.
follow
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Okay, then I think we're nearly 5 past, so it's probably a good time to start. Welcome everyone to this street talk, which is I think the last of this academic year, definitely. We're really excited to have a talk this time, not by an academic, but in fact by someone who's trying to put all these ideas that we sometimes generate into practice and also check them with actual people who use or supposedly should use the public space and the street in particular. So welcome Elise Moeskops. She's a counselor for the city of Amsterdam. And she came, I think, on my radar when it was announced that she was successful in getting this. Is it law now, or is it how do you call it? Policy. Yeah, your sound is still off, actually, Lisa.
Is it?
Oh, no. Now I do hear you just now. Yeah. So it became an idea, became policy, and it was a really interesting idea to change public space making, I would say, and make it more friendly to a wide range of users by looking at especially the role of young women or girls in public space. And I think it is very intriguing and very interesting. So we felt it fitted really well. But Elise will obviously tell you more about it. I think you've been in the council for a number of years now, but it's only part of your identity. So I think that's important to stress. She also has another job or multiple. I think you're a vinologist as well as an entrepreneur, restaurant owner. And on top of that, creating these wonderful plans and making them a reality for the city of Amsterdam. So with no further ado, and for those of you, again, who have not attended previously, this is a very informal format. So Elise will talk, we can ask questions. Generally, we do that at the end of a talk, but if you have a question in the meantime, please raise your digital hand and we'll find you. But it's really a platform for the exchange of ideas. So, Elise, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Danielle. Well, as Danielle mentioned, I'm a city council member for D66 in Amsterdam, which is the Central Progressive Party. Democrat 66 is what it stands for. And so I came to be in the city council member 3 years ago. This is my first run, my first period, but I've also been active in the city center in the borough district before that. And I do several policies. Arts and culture is one of my policy domains, as is traffic and public space. And I do half of what they call general affairs, which is everything the mayor has its sole responsibility at, which is basically safety and licensing in the Netherlands, more or less. During the day, because in the Netherlands, being a council member for a city is a part-time job. I own 2 restaurants and a little agency that helps promote drinks brands in the Dutch market. And before that, and I think that's good to stress, I worked for an importer of wines. And that is sort of where my love for public space and traffic came about, because I was faced with logistics. And especially in a city center, they can be very challenging. And I saw all the dilemmas that rose there. And that's why I put up my finger when they asked what kind of subjects would you like to do. And I said, I'd love to be involved in the outdoor space and traffic about 8 years ago when that came about. So that's a little bit about me. What happened 3 years ago, more or less, when I started, I was quickly confronted by the fact that everything in especially traffic is so one-dimensional when it comes to policy, or maybe it's more polarized. It's bike versus car, it's pedestrian versus housing, it's green versus water. It's, all these things are sort of juxtapositions next to each other, and I found it a bit odd. So I'll tell you a little bit about how this initiative came about and also the content of it, because I think the process might be just as interesting as the end results in a way. And but I'd like to start, because I think that's important in the time that we live in, to stress that I would like to thank you all for all the work that you're doing. I mean, without all the research and academics behind everything I would never have been able to make this proposal. And sometimes it's nice to know that there are still a couple of politicians left that really appreciate the work that you guys are doing. So I find that important to stress before we start. So you are looking at a picture of some otters. When I was confronted with this one-dimensional view of traffic, there were 2 publications I read that started separately in my mind, and at the end of this proposal became one. One is, if translated badly, The Right of the Fastest, which is a Dutch book about how basically the car became the dominant principle in traffic policy, mainly due because of the programs after the Second World War, which were so dominated by the Americans, which so gave a view about car domination, but also getting from A to B the fastest, efficiency, as much people getting from A to B as possible, as sort of the summum, the best thing that you could accomplish with traffic policy, which is not necessarily the case. I mean, it's a matter of opinion what the best way to handle your traffic is. Isn't it more having an environment of traffic which allows people to get from A to B as comfortable as possible? Or maybe it is allowing as many different types of people taking a part in getting from A to B. What is actually the best way to get from A to B? And that book really opened my eyes to the fact that, like, a dominant idea has so long been the dominant idea that we're not questioning it anymore. Then I read another thing, research about the University of the Erasmus University in Rotterdam, which was basically called Outside, Why Girls Matter, something like that. And one of the sentences there that really struck to me is that they said young girls or young women are the otters of the outdoor space. Just like otters are celebrated when they are in the water, because that means that your water quality is good. We should celebrate young women being outside, because if they are outside, the quality of your outdoor is good. If we manage to get the young girls outside, we know that everybody would like the space. And they made a really good argument there. So I read these 2 things, one about traffic, other policy domain, one more about public space. And back then they were still sort of separate. And then in my time as a council member, being also confronted with many policy proposals from our aldermans, I came about, there we go, this idea that if you want to make a design that is truly welcoming and it feels hospitable, we should ask women more what they need, because we hardly ever do, basically. Or we don't know that we ask them. There were some interesting little things about our national railroad company being very proud of the fact that the safety feeling on our stations had a good grade. I think it was a 7.2 or something, really proud. But it didn't ask about gender. And then there was another research by Pointer, a media program, who asked women in the Netherlands what are the most unsafe places, and they all mentioned train stations. So those two sort of they didn't match, did they? Which led to an idea that maybe if you'd ask all the women how they'd feel about the station, they'd give it a 4. But the guys just all would give it a 9. Yeah, then you end up with a 7.2, which sounds great, but maybe there's still something wrong with your train stations. We just don't know. And when I delved a little bit more, the good news about being a council member, if you call up people, at least as a council member of Amsterdam, they tend to pick up the phone. A lot of researchers, professors, directors of big company, they are willing to spend a little time with you and make you smarter. And the great thing is that you are by definition, every type of research is presented to you. So you're never in that sort of either psychology or sociology or traffic or whatever. Everybody sort of mixes. So that's where they end up with me. And I was confronted with a couple of things that I found really interesting. One from psychology, more neuropsychology, explaining to me that the way we see between men and women is just very different. You have different receptor cells in your eyes. Guys see light a lot better than girls, and girls see color better than guys. And most people actually know that men are more colorblind than women, but not a lot of people know that a lot more women struggle with night vision than men, which is just a biological principle. It still originated from the time that we needed to look for ripe berries, and otherwise we'd poison our tribe, and the guys needed to hunt for game in the middle of the night or in the early morning. So it was very important for them to see light well. And then one of the things that always is the first thing that people do when we say something is an unsafe spot, they talk about adding more light. But then the question is, what kind of light? Especially if you know that we see things differently, but also we look at different things. And that's where this picture comes in. It's a staircase and a tunnel. And what you see is that the female response, if you track their eye movement, is very centered about the dark spots, about making sure no one is approaching them. The male response is far more linear. Is where do I need to go? And that's where I'm going. That's where I'm looking. I don't care what happens around me. And that has something to do with the way that we just are biologically wired, is that women don't see that well in the dark. So having one light source, which can be very bright, doesn't really help us for our safety feeling. Actually, it can be counterproductive. If you put a woman in a spotlight, she's very well seen, but she can't see, because the difference between light and dark is difficult for us. So that's actually helps in making a lot of women feel more like a prey, then it will help their safety feeling. I came about with a lady called Eva James. She's a researcher who made this, which is in Dutch, unfortunately. But for me, it was really helpful because it was the first time someone really looked at the Amsterdam outdoor. And she made a proposal for a city square focused on what young women would like to see in this city square. Unfortunately, it never came about. It's stuck in research. What she did is she went to talk with the girls that used this square. And it says things like, oh, that's where I like to go with my little brother. I don't really like to go there because they're the guys play soccer and they make a lot of noise and it doesn't feel like a place for me. This is where the scary guys with, I think, knives hang out. So there's all these sort of feelings. This is where I go dancing. How do they use this space and how would they like to use the space? I'd love to meet there, but then we always go into town because there are not enough free spaces to hang and the terraces are too expensive. So she really made this sort of mental map of this square and how it is used by young women and what we can do for them to make it nicer, basically. And that is also something that has been done in Vienna for quite a long time. They were one of the first to really incorporate a female view in designing the outdoor. So they've had a lot of experience, last 40 years, noticing also that the way our participation processes are designed are quite male focused. It is a little bit the analogy of something that we've finally learned, that you need to write a job application, or how do you call it, the job demands differently for male than for females. Most males look at 10 things that are asked for and think, hey, I have 2, I might be able to apply for the job. A female in general, they're all very generalized. Let's say that aloud as well. They're really generalized, but they will see 9 things that they can do and 1 thing that they don't have. And they say, I'm not qualified for the job, so I won't apply. The way you do things matter. And what they noticed in Vienna, that sending out surveys or saying, hey, come here and we would like to know your opinion, tends to have elder women and all males basically attend. What especially young women who like to be a little bit more in the background need is someone that is in a physical place asking them, hey, can I ask you a question? We would value your input. So what they did, they would just put tables on the squares and the streets they would like to redesign, and then just ask the people that would walk by, male and female, with an extra added bonus that these are the people that are actually using the space. If you give a survey, even in the neighborhood, you sometimes have people that actually don't use the square that you're talking about because they always are centered more to the east or to the west or whatever. So they have a lot of lessons to be learned about how we can incorporate the female opinion. Also, other cities, Malmö, Vienna, that have been a little bit further, they just generated a couple of general principles that will make a place more friendly to use for young women. And this is something that I really love, especially a little bit the top. The first picture gives someone with a carrier for babies. And then we have someone who doesn't walk that freely without crutches. And actually, they need the same things. And that is somewhere where the otters come in again. If you look at a very large population, which is women, and then you zoom in a little bit more and you go to young women, they are in general the group that logs around either younger brothers and sisters or are getting ready or just had their first baby, and walking with a stroller has the same necessities as getting around in a city with a wheelchair or with a visual handicap. A lot of the things are the same, basically. So a lot of the intersectional needs sort of come together in that one perspective. Great examples of public space that have been designed properly, as you could say. I think the bottom left is very nice. The round seatings, a lot of places to hang that feel sort of safe, that have little sort of constrictions, sort of make it feel cozy and fun. Well, all that, and I ended up with these decision points, because that's in the end all what matters when you make a policy proposal. The right of initiative is not used a lot, to be honest, in the city council, because first of all, it's a lot of work. And second of all, it's quite difficult to get right without the help of the thousands of civil servants that our aldermen have. And it took me a while to get here. So I ended up with this concept of a welcome or hospitable outdoor space. I really didn't want it to be only about women, although I really argue in my proposal that if we would shift that dominant perspective from, let's say, the healthy white male of a certain age, the standard person, as you could say, to more young females, we would gain so much for so many people that this is a very doable approach to making the city more hospitable. So this idea of welcoming architecture or welcoming outdoor space, my first decision point was to embed this in our biggest new policy about the outdoor space, which is Amsterdam maakt ruimte. Amsterdam will make space is basically the title. So I wanted this to be a part of that big policy document. Seeing how we can incorporate this concept in our designs was basically the second one. Check every year the thermometer of Amsterdam public space. Ask who are you, where are you from, what is your gender, and how do you feel about our public space, and just double check every year where do we feel nice and where is it we need to do some work, which is the best way to sort of see where we need to do stuff. Don't try to do everything yourself, but see in the other cities what they did and where we can learn. And if we look at street furniture, one of my earlier proposals was basically to ban hostile architecture from Dutch public space, for Amsterdam public space. But I think we should do more. It's not just not hostile architecture or design elements, but you should pursue welcoming alternatives. So need to go a step further. One of the most talked about proposals in the list is number 6. When we redesign a space, we normally make a pretty picture. We make a picture of a springtime, great sunshine, all the trees in bloom and the space looking as beautiful as it can be. And I think that's a good thing to do, because if we invest tax money, we should invest it in a way that we know that it will make a beautiful and hospitable surrounding. But we should also look at that same space in its worst conditions. Poor weather, at dusk, you know, when the light is out, the natural light is out and the artificial light comes in. How does it look then? How does it feel then? And I would strongly believe that making 2 visualizations of a new design will change the way we look at public space. Number 7 is to see where we still have hostile architecture and try to get out of it. And then the last one, which is probably the biggest one when it comes to what we're going to do, is start with a couple of pilots. Look at the things that we want to redesign in Amsterdam and start by doing them just with the help of young women and see where we end up and how that works and what we can do and what we can learn from it. So that's the proposal. Then a couple of more words about the process, and then we'll get to talking, because I think that's better. What was very interesting, that from day one, when I sort of introduced the idea to the council committee for public space, I had a political majority. I could have just, you know, written it down in 10 lines and saying, hey, this is what I want to do. We would vote and it would pass. But what I also noticed, talking to civil servants, getting official recommendations and the remarks from the aldermen, from the civil servants, that they were very negative. Some of them were, okay, we'll do it. but they were very, yeah, but we haven't done anything wrong. Isn't this something we're basically already doing? And I thought, I understand this hesitation because people are trained to design public space through that dominant perspective for all their life. And they haven't done anything wrong because they've done it in the way that they've been taught that public space should be. So that was one end of the spectrum, saying sort of like, we don't need this. I saw that Anna is in the call, who told me that when she did some research with some students, they looked at all the public space policy documents in Amsterdam looking for the word gender or female, male. I can't remember how many times, but it was maybe 2 hands full twice. Well, anyways, a couple of times that in designing our public space, the word gender or female or male came about. So we weren't doing it. We weren't looking at the different groups that used the public space. So what I did, instead of just applying it and making my politics work, I thought I need to change the way that our design teams in the city think. They need to feel this. Because if you don't feel that we have something to gain by adding a female perspective, it's not going to work. I mean, I can sort of submit this and I'll get a piece of paper, but it won't resonate into design because that's a creative process and you need to feel that we need to make this change. So I organized a couple of meetings. We call it an expert session. This is also a tool we have as a council member where we can invite people from outside City Hall, experts, be it from practice or research or whatever, to talk about why I made this proposal and their opinion about it. And officially, I did this for the city council. So I called up all my colleagues and they said, you liked my proposal? Yes, I think you need to come. But honestly, I'm not organizing this for you. I'm organizing this for all the guys and girls on the bleachers who are watching, who are part of our civil servant team that need to make this come to life. And I had a couple of very almost touching experiences. I had one civil servant coming up to me and said, you know what, I feel horrible. I am partly responsible for designing light plans. And I've been doing this for 35 years, and I've never been told about this biological difference between men and women seeing light. So I'm sorry, I just didn't know. I said, you don't have to apologize, you didn't know. But something we should take into account. And then the person that wrote the main critique on my proposal as a head of the team that needed to remark it from the civil servants came up to me and said, you know what? Maybe I wasn't the right guy to write this critique. Maybe I should have made a team that was a little bit more diverse, maybe from different policy backgrounds, maybe from different backgrounds and genders, before we wrote the critiques, because you've opened my eyes to the fact that we are being very linear about how we are doing our work. I found that very touching. So that's when I decided to file the proposal, and it became formal policy. However, now we're doing the second step, because all these things need to become reality. And a couple of them are very easy, right? That thermometer, it just needs to come because the city council demanded it. We are the boss. It will come. But for instance, those pilots, it's work, because we're noticing, again, resistance from people saying, we're not doing anything wrong. Isn't this something we've already taken into account? We always ask everybody what they feel about a public design project. Yes, but that's not the point. The point is that you need to be more specific. You need to go after the groups that won't raise their hands naturally. And on the other hand, by focusing on young women, aren't we excluding other groups that need our help? So they're basically on two axis saying, isn't taking a large group difficult? On the one hand, resistance isn't the perspective we've always had, the right perspective. And on the other hand, if you want to diversify on the perspective, isn't taking this big perspective of young women not too narrow and exclusive in its own. My response to the latter is always, but young women are by definition intersectional. And let's also be honest, we've forgotten about this very big group for the last 750 years while designing Amsterdam. We are celebrating our birthday this year as a city. It might be time to take a little bit of more than half of our population serious. That's it. Question.
Thank you, Elisa. That was, I think, really very inspiring and thought-provoking. I have lots of questions myself, but I'm going to open the floor first to our audience. So please raise either your hand or your digital hand if you want to ask a question, and maybe it's nice if you briefly say, state your affiliation or who you are. I don't see any hands as of yet. Maybe I can start. I had just a sort of a follow-up question. You said something about the pilot projects. Have they started yet, or are they in the process? And how do you decide where you're starting?
So no, they are in the process. As a council member, as a politician, I don't do execution. That's not my job, basically. But there's now a project team trying to decide first which projects are suitable. I mean, there's a couple of things you should take into consideration. I'd like them to happen a bit fast. So they need to already be planned for renovation. They shouldn't be too big. You don't need to do like the main square which is also a traffic conjunction, because you want to keep it sort of containable. There's a couple of things that we need to take into consideration. One is already semi-decided upon. There's a project that wants to redesign a couple of pedestrian tunnels in the southeast of Amsterdam that will probably make the list. But I hope that even still before summer, so somewhere coming month, I'll be briefed upon what the city governance has decided upon to be the pilot projects, and then we'll be critical about it, because that is my job as a council member.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear, and also the lack of control in a way you have over what is going to happen. Yeah.
Lisa, I have a question. Will most of these projects be in the city center, so in central areas of the city, or also do you have a specific approach or also some consideration of suburban areas or areas that are a little bit more fragile, deprived?
Well, I think we need to do it in both, especially for the pilots, because both areas have their own challenges. The pedestrian tunnels are definitely more to the outskirts and a little bit more in a challenging area. The southeast of Amsterdam is the most multicultural and one of our poorest areas, so that will be definitely a project. On the other hand, there's also a big challenge in the heart of historic city center, because one of the things people always say, yeah, it's been designed 750 years ago, it's all monumental, what can we do? And then we can do a lot, because also in historical parts like that, changing the lighting, changing also like the position of seating, to the street or facing the street or facing away from the street makes a difference. So you can do so much also with small things that I think in my preference, we do a couple of pilots in very diverse areas of the city, because in the end, we need to do it everywhere. So we need to learn as fast as we can. Would you have an opinion about that? I mean, why do you ask the question?
No, the question because typically when even when we speak about pedestrian streets or some interventions that are a little bit also flagship for some sustainable actions, they tend to be concentrated in the city center or areas that are more frequented, known, and while other areas in the city that could be suburban or not where kind of everyone would go during the weekend tend to be a little bit forgotten when we do these pilot projects or when we do these interventions. So it's interesting to see that you're taking that into consideration.
Yeah.
Yes, it's also part of something that has been initiated, thankfully, in this period by the city in general. Let's see if I can translate this. Invest unequally to create equality, basically. So we are directing a lot of our funds in many policy areas, but especially in the public space, more towards the outskirts of the city, because one of the things that's also part of my proposal, but also more part of this general idea, is public space matters. You know, it's not only where a lot of people come, but feeling safe, feeling secure, going outside is part of the fiber of a social network. We tend to do in policy domains, we call it the hard and the soft policy domains. You know, everything's social, soft, and outdoor, and building houses hard. But I always say, I think the outdoor space is the most soft policy domain we have, because that's where people meet. So we need to make sure that, especially in those areas, we need to make it right.
Indeed.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up, sort of one of my questions was about the intersectionality, not just about the people, but also thinking about the variety of sort of the current design and the sort of the physical characteristics of the space that is sort of inherent, I guess, to Katarina's question as well. I think they are, but it's really interesting to compare if you have particular groups of girls in different areas and how they behave and what kind of needs they would have depending on what the local infrastructure is. Anyway, I see Luca has also raised his hand. And Irene,
Yes.
Luca.
Yes, thanks a lot. First of all, I'm really happy to hear this. I live in Amsterdam myself. It's a very hopeful message that you gave. I just have this question about the next step. You said these pilots. Are there concrete initiatives also about two other things? One is data collection. You also showed, and of course my colleague Anna is also working on this, and Irene and others, that there's really a lack of data about this, and you named Vienna and other places where these things are done. This has really been a crucial step. So that was my first question. And the second question, which is also a bit inspired by what happened in cities like Vienna, okay, one is pilots. Maybe we have very important places where we really show what it can be, but a lot of this is really small things everywhere, putting more benches or a bit wider sidewalks, or maybe having more variety in pictures on streetlights. Again, is there also something of this sort? So not to a very nice square, but some little interventions on a bit larger scale.
Yes, I mean, I don't know if we shared the entire proposal, but it's in Dutch, but hey, there's Google Translate. But what I tried to do, I mean, these are the 8 decision points I just showed you, but the entire proposal is, I think, 16, 17 pages. It's quite bulky for an initiative. But what I try to do is give as many examples as possible that I sort of saw in all my reading and talking. So to also give sort of the people that are going to do the pilots, but also in general, sort of, yeah, stepping stones to start. A couple of them I've done also in separate proposals. One of the ones I am most proud of, to be honest, which it's interesting, this proposal generated a lot of attention. You know, I got media and stuff, which is great because then people like Daniela and Anna reached out to me as well and made me even smarter. So it was wonderful. But one of the things I've done beforehand, which is very big in a way, is that in Amsterdam, we've now changed the logic of pedestrian crossings. Yeah, normally you have a sidewalk, you go down, you make a pedestrian crossing, you go up again. And the only way you would raise the pedestrian crossing is if cars would go too fast. The most male-dominated mode of transport, that's also noisy and bad for your health and bad for a lot of other groups, neurodiversity, etc. So we've changed the logic. Instead of only raising them when cars misbehave, we will always raise them in only if it's not possible. I mean, there are some reasons, water management, the corridor for police and ambulances. There's a couple of reasons why you can't raise them, which is fine. But our logic will be, we'll raise them unless impossible. This is a huge difference. In 30 years, walking through our city will feel very different because we gave the space to the pedestrians. And so I made a couple of those smaller ones. We've banned benches with the anti-sleep things in the middle. So we banned a couple of things that are very general by separate proposals. But what I hope to do with this larger proposal is more paradigm switch. You know, think of the outdoor space, because it's not everywhere you should change the lighting and it will be good. No, you need to think differently about the outdoor space.
Great. I see that we have some questions in the chat, but maybe
Yeah.
may-
We have raised hands and questions in the chat. I think one question in the chat that is still there, and the others have now by now figured out how they raise their hand or are able to talk. But Kevin Wolf writes, you spoke earlier about someone mentioning not having indoor spaces that were free to use and therefore needing to go into the city. Have you come across a solution for this issue?
Well, yes and no, because I would love everybody to have indoor space that they are free to use, but that's something I can't magically make appear. It's also private properties and a whole different discussion. Making the outdoor space more accessible will help, because then they don't need to leave their neighborhood for being socially active. So that also comes in canopies, rain management, being able to go outside when it's wet, which it normally is in Amsterdam. So there's a lot of things you could do there. But also part of the examples I give is also think about housing, which is not, the policy domain of outdoor space, but it does make a difference. The way that we build our houses, be it sightlines from the inside to the outside, which will make a lot of people feel more safe in the outside, but also the way you organize public spaces within housing can also help. So there's sort of little hooks there to start thinking about that one. But I think I need to go for a second term and also go for indoor space, but we'll see.
Yeah, I also think they're connected. So yeah.
Yeah, they are. But
yeah. Irene, you raised your hand early on.
Yeah, I managed to learn how to raise my hand in Zoom. I want to say, well, nice to meet you, Elise. I'm also working with Anna Nikolaeva, so you know a little bit of our project already. And yeah, we have a lot of insights that really resonate with your what you explain about the challenges and resistance that you are facing when introducing these kinds of topics. In my case, I've been working mostly in Barcelona and Santiago de Chile, and I'm more into Amsterdam. So good to know by your talk, like what's happening here. thank you as well for pushing the agenda in your side, the political side. I wanted to ask you something, because one of the difficulties on introducing this gender perspective sometimes, in the case, for example, of Barcelona, we find that it has been introduced by a particular government, that a particular party. So now that we have a change of government, it's seen as a project that it was like the flagship of a particular government initiative. So I don't know how does it work this in Amsterdam, like how is it framed? Like, is it something that really comes from an initiative from you, from your party? Like, how are the political how is the opposition reacting to this? Like, a little bit of this background that I may miss.
Yeah, it's a good question and a matter for concern. I think in general, politics seems to be, and policy seems to be more fleeting the last couple of years because of larger switches between elections. A couple of things to say. I mean, first of all, I think weirdly enough, being from my party helps a little bit because we are very centrist. So people don't tend to hate us, which helps. But still, I'm very progressive. So the more conservative side would tend to feel some opposition. When we put the proposal into vote, there were only 2 parties that voted against of the, how many do we have? 11 now in the city council, which was basically completely right-winged, 2 seats, and more central right, but they had a different reason. Basically, they thought that these kind of proposals does not belong on the city level, but on the borough level, which is something you can debate about. I mean, that's not a principal reason to vote against, right? It's just a matter of the how and where, and not something that if we would change government, they would strongly advocate of demolishing everything that we've now built or starting to build. On the other hand, Amsterdam is lucky that I think the chance that we will have a non-progressive majority is very slim. But I do also think that we are challenged in politics and society, that we are losing the very conservative people. I mean, I don't care about the political parties as long as I win. I care about the people behind it, and we shouldn't lose them. So that's also why I really tried to frame the entire proposal as being beneficial to all. I think it's very important right now, maybe I might be from the inside, but I'm trying to frame my proposal as not too feminist. I'm trying to frame it as something very logical. You know, if we will take more than half of our population and now give them a little bit more attention, we will create an outdoor space that also, for that standard person, the outdoor space will be better. It will feel nicer. And don't you have a daughter that wants to feel safe outdoors, etc., etc., etc. So I think it's also a matter of not being too activistic about it, which I might be from the inside, but if I want to keep this sustainably embedded in policy, I need to argue the general point. I don't know if it will help, but I tried.
Okay. Thank you. I see 2 more hands, and there's a question in the chat, but let's start with Miriam and then Tom, and then we'll do the question in the chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting. My question is really quick. So how do you have any further ideas to reach out for these women or other groups that are not usually vocal, especially, for example, in the case of the survey in the square? It's very interesting. But what if the level of the direction is so large that people are not even there anymore? So do you have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think this is a challenge. I mean, the otter principle, basically, also the other side of the same medal is that young women are the first group to stay inside. either by choice or by demand. So they are the quickest to lose, basically. But I think that we can learn a lot from Vienna, from Malmö, from some other cities of how to reach out to these groups. And it's also just a matter of not giving up. I mean, I know that sounds a little bit but the fact that if you want to redesign a square, you put your table there and all your respondents are still male, we need to take that extra step and ring doorbells and go to, I mean, we know the places where young women do tend to frequent the longest. Groceries is just a traditional female job, isn't it? So we know places where we can find them still the best. And then maybe we should also weigh them differently. The example is we're in that square, we spoke to 90 guys and we managed to speak to 3 girls. Maybe we should take their opinion more serious because we only spoke to 3. So I'm sorry, this is now going to be a little bit more part of our perspective. I think that's also important to sort of see how you weigh public participation. If you know that a group is fragile, their voice should be, if their voice is soft, they should be listened to harder, basically.
Thank you. I think, Tokay, you wrote something in the chat which is very similar, so maybe this is already answered. If not, then do either raise your hand or write something in the chat. Tom.
Hi, thank you for your great presentation. I live part-time in London and part-time in Amsterdam. And I just wondered about some of the framing of this. I don't disagree with any of the how things are being implemented. It sounds fantastic. But I wondered, some of my thoughts listening to what you're saying made me pause a little bit. And when you describe young women, they, saying they are waiting for, or they've just had their first child, it sounds so prescriptive about what you imagine women's lives to be. And then in consequence, you design the space around a prescriptive idea about womanhood or femininity. Now, I can't argue with wider pavements. I don't have a problem with wider pavements, but it's just a question of framing. I wondered really how much you could push the intersectionality. In my city in London, the kids on my block who carry knives, they do that because they are under threat, because they feel not safe. So in listening to all the voices of young women, wherever they're from, you might just listen to racist idiots talking about what people think about the kids who carry knives. And there needs to be some, I just wonder if you can push the intersectionality. And then the other 2 things about the framing is I wondered about what the purpose of public space here was. And it seems to be very much about social production and leisure and spending money. But, historians would say that the importance of the emergence of public space with the emergence of cities particularly is that it becomes a fulcrum and an engine of social change where radical practices can happen. And so I just wondered about all of the different kinds of ways this is being framed, that as a sort of critique, but without actually saying, I have any problem with what you're implementing.
No, that's fine. I understand where you're coming from, because of course this has been something I've struggled with as well. You know, the thing is, outdoor space can only be designed once. Well, multiple times, but once every 40 years, basically, right? So we can't make it perfect for every, let's say, niche group, because we just can't. And also making it something workable as a city, we need to do generalizations, which are not always nice, you know, but it's also something we should be a little bit less politically correct about, I strongly feel. Because the example I gave, that the fact that our railway company doesn't ask for gender anymore, and when they talk about safety, you're missing out a point. Not every point, but you're missing out a point at least. And if people don't want to answer, that should always also be an option. I think that what most research, especially the research of safety, I can't translate that properly, veiligheidskunde, I don't know, and sociology of outdoor space, and also a lot of architectural research that I've seen shows that if you take that perspective of the young female, you tend to have so many intersexual interest protected. And yes, they come from generalizations of female life. But maybe unfortunately, but a lot of generalizations are just still true. And we can deny them, and we can fight against those stereotypes, which we should. But then they are still true, for now, at least. So if you look at the large group of young women, there are a lot of young females logging around young siblings or getting babies and being the one in the relationship pushing the stroller. I know that my husband doesn't get away with this, but unfortunately, it's just a lot of the reality that we are still confronted with. That doesn't mean that if you design, it should be the only perspective, because that's also why I am so, let's say, enthusiastic about that table in the square, which feels so simple. But you will talk to the people actually in the neighborhood. And every neighborhood differs when it comes to cultural background, economic background, etc., etc. So just being there physically also will help you get to a lot of those groups that we normally struggle to reach as a city, because sending out a survey, which is mainly in Dutch, excludes a lot of people. Sending out something digital excludes a lot of people that don't have as many accessibility to computers or digital skills. So being there physically also helps. So that's that otter principle that for me sort of gave me comfort, that sometimes we don't have to push for every subgroup. We just need to make the big steps first, and then the small steps will follow. Best I can do, I'm afraid.
No, that's really wonderful, actually. And so just to respond to Tom, one of a couple of your criticism, which I also subscribe to partly. I mean, in a way, my sort of profession as a historian makes that I'm yes, I do believe in change, but there's also an awful lot of continuity in women's lives. But what I liked about the slide that you showed, in fact, on the that was made as a result of these interviews with these young women in a particular neighborhood in Amsterdam Oost in the Indische Buurt. I saw a couple of things there actually that seemed to be phrases from these women saying we don't want to spend too much time here because you have to pay to sit here, right? That's a topic that we've discussed a lot also in this context in the street talks with one of our colleagues. And there was also the element of imagination. If we could, then we would, you know. So I'm quite optimistic about those approaches actually, and about using these kinds of creative methods, or partly creative methods maybe, to within the constraints of what patriarchy or what our society sort of puts on all these different people, I do see the opportunity to think about these current constraints and how they might want to change them, that makes room for other ways of living, I would say. Anyway, I thought that was wonderful and really thought-provoking. We are a little past 2:00. I don't know if there is any further urgent question. No, people seem quite satisfied or very satisfied. We actually had a lot of really positive comments and nice things in the chat as well, Elise. So please have a look at the chat. It was really very wonderful to see so many of you. I think Katerina shared the LinkedIn.
Yes, in the chat. So
yeah, so you can follow us there as well. And we have not yet planned for the new series of street talks for the next year, but we're in the process of. So for all of you who think I actually want to also present my work here, please do reach out to us. And if you want to become involved in the platform, please also write to us or connect to us via LinkedIn. Okay, then I'll hope to see you next year, and have a great summer, everyone, and enjoy the streets.
Thank you for inviting me.
summer in the streets.
Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.